Kale stepped off the transport and into the grand hall of the Galactic Council. The ceiling arched high above him, glowing with colors he had never seen before, colors that shifted and danced as if alive. Dozens of alien species filled the chamber, each more extraordinary than the next. Some were taller than buildings, their bodies covered in shining armor-like scales. Others floated effortlessly, their translucent wings glinting in the light. Their eyes, horns, and tentacles all gave an impression of power and intelligence, but also a sense of pride that felt intimidating. Kyle, a lone human ambassador, felt smaller than he had ever felt in his life. He adjusted his uniform and took a deep breath. Humanity had sent him here alone, to speak for an entire species that the galaxy had always underestimated. They called humans weak, fragile, and insignificant. Many thought Earthlings had no place in galactic politics or discussions of culture, beauty, or strength. Kale had heard the whispers and the laughter in other corridors before his arrival, and yet he was here. He was alive. He was human. At the center of the chamber, a figure appeared that immediately drew every eye. She was tall, more elegant than anything Kale had ever imagined. Her skin shimmered like liquid silver, flowing as if it were water rather than flesh. Her eyes glowed a deep violet, glowing faintly in a way that made the air feel charged. Every movement she made seemed graceful, effortless, but at the same time powerful. She approached him slowly, her gaze fixed directly on him. Kyle could feel the weight of the entire council watching him, waiting for his response to her. When she stopped in front of him, the hall fell completely silent. Every alien being turned their heads toward the human. She leaned slightly forward, tilting her head in curiosity. "Tell me, human," she said, her voice like music, "why do you find me beautiful?" The words struck Kale like a bolt of lightning. He had expected difficult questions about treaties, wars, or resources, but not this. This question carried weight, a challenge, and a test. He felt the eyes of countless species on him, expectant, skeptical, even mocking. He could almost hear the whispers. What can a human possibly know about beauty? Kale's heart pounded in his chest. He felt the pressure of representing humanity, the entire species he had been taught to be proud of despite the galaxy's scorn. He remembered the stories of human resilience, how they had survived plagues, wars, and natural disasters on Earth, how they had built civilizations from nothing and explored the stars when no one believed they could. Somehow that courage had to shine in this moment. He looked at her, really looked. Her beauty was undeniable, yes, but it wasn't only in the smooth shimmer of her skin or the depth of her glowing eyes. It was in the way she carried herself, in the confidence and curiosity in her voice. Kale realized that the question wasn't just about her. It was about perspective, about how someone chooses to see the world and others in it. He straightened, took a slow, steady breath, and let his mind settle. He didn't need fancy words or flattery. He needed honesty. This was the human way, to speak truth even when it seemed impossible, even when the entire galaxy doubted him. "My lady," Kale began, his voice calm but firm, "I find you beautiful because you are exactly who you are, because you exist in a way that reflects courage, honesty, and curiosity. Those qualities are rare in the galaxy, and they shine brighter than any appearance." A hush fell over the chamber. Even Kale could feel the tension, the weight of all the eyes on him, waiting to see if a human could actually answer such a question with meaning. The alien woman's violet eyes widened slightly and her head tilted in surprise. Whispers ran among the council delegates. Some seemed confused, others intrigued, but none could look away. For the first time in history, a human had spoken in a way that made the entire council pause. Kale took another breath, steadying himself. This was only the beginning. The moment had come to show the galaxy that humans were more than their size, their technology, or the ridicule of others. Humans had a perspective, a courage, and a way of seeing truth that no one had ever expected, and he, Kale, would be the one to show them. The chamber remained silent after Kale's words. The Alien Council, a gathering of centuries-old species, had seen diplomats from hundreds of worlds, but none had answered a question like this with such honesty. Kale felt the weight of their attention pressing down on him, yet he stood tall. He could sense that the luminous alien, her name he would soon learn was Seralith, was studying him closely, as if trying to see into his very thoughts. "Your words are unusual," Seralith said, her voice still calm but tinged with curiosity. Most beings would speak of adornments, of beauty as a measure of status or power. Yet you speak as if it is a reflection of truth itself. Kyle nodded slowly, keeping his eyes on her. Beauty is not in the surface, he said. It is not in the way someone looks or the way they move. Beauty is in the choices they make, in the courage they carry, in the honesty they show. Those qualities shine brighter than any color, any pattern, any glow. The chamber stirred quietly. A massive alien with crystalline skin clicked its mandibles in surprise. A floating, jellyfish-like being tilted its translucent head in confusion. No one had ever framed beauty like this. For most species, beauty was a weapon, a tool to command respect or inspire fear. But Kale's words cut through that notion with the simple clarity of truth. Saralith's eyes narrowed slightly, as though she were testing him further. "And what makes you believe that a human can understand such things?" she asked. Her tone was gentle but probing, like a surgeon pressing lightly to see if a wound would bleed. Kyle took a steadying breath, feeling the small but powerful flame of human pride rise inside him. "We are small and fragile," he said, "and the galaxy underestimates us. But we learn. We survive. We care for each other even when it is difficult. We fight for what is right, not because it is easy, but because it must be done. That is how we understand beauty. Through struggle, through effort, through seeing the worth in others when it is not obvious." A murmur ran through the council. Some delegates leaned forward, intrigued. Others whispered in disbelief. Yet none could ignore the sincerity in Kale's voice. It was not arrogance, nor fear, nor flattery. It was honesty, and honesty had a weight no weapon could match. Saralith stepped slightly closer, her silver skin glinting under the hall's shifting light. "And yet, your species is mocked, small, insignificant to most," she said. "How can you speak of beauty when your own people are dismissed?" Kale's chest tightened, but he did not falter. Being dismissed does not mean being worthless. Humans are ordinary, yes, but in that ordinariness lies the power to change, to adapt, to create. We find beauty not only in the extraordinary, but in the effort to rise above our limits. That is why I can speak of beauty, even as the galaxy laughs at us. Because true beauty is not in perfection. It is in persistence, in courage, and in the truth we choose to see in others. The chamber grew quieter still. Even the skeptics among the council could not argue with the simple logic of Kale's words. Some of the older species, who had witnessed countless conflicts and rivalries, seemed to nod subtly, recognizing the wisdom in the human's perspective. Saralith's gaze softened. "Humans, you do not fear being small. You speak as if size and power do not matter," she murmured. "It is a rare kind of strength to value truth over appearance." Kale allowed himself a small nod. "Strength is not always in power. Sometimes it is in patience. Sometimes it is in seeing value where others see weakness. And sometimes it is in speaking truth, even when the entire universe doubts you." For the first time, the council's attention shifted from mockery to reflection. Kyle could feel the weight of his words settling into their minds, leaving a quiet space for thought where before there had only been judgment. Humanity, fragile and small, was being listened to. And in that moment, Kale knew that the galaxy's perception of his species could change, starting with this single conversation. Kale felt the weight of the chamber like a heavy wind pressing on him from all sides. Every eye in the council watched him, and every mind seemed to question whether a human could truly grasp what they considered profound. Yet in that silence, Kale found clarity. He realized that the luminous alien, Saralith, wasn't trying to trap him. She was testing him. She wanted to know if a human could see beyond appearances, beyond power, beyond fear. She stepped closer, her violet eyes searching his face as if trying to read his soul. "And what makes you think that your perspective matters at all?" she asked softly, though the tone carried the weight of the entire council. "Humans are tiny in comparison to us. Your lives are brief. Your species has barely touched the stars. Why should your judgment of beauty hold any meaning?" Kale's heart beat fast, but he didn't flinch. He lifted his chin, letting the calm steadiness of his voice fill the silence. Because meaning is not measured in size or age. Meaning comes from understanding, from honesty, from courage. Humans are small, yes, but in that smallness we see the universe differently. We notice things that others overlook. We value effort, persistence, and truth even when it is inconvenient. That is why our perspective matters. A ripple ran through the council. Some delegates clicked their mandibles or rustled their wings, expressing confusion or disbelief. Yet others leaned forward, curious. Kale could feel the tension, a mix of challenge and fascination pressing against his chest. He knew he had to go further, to make them see not just his words but the heart behind them. He took a deep breath, letting his voice grow stronger. I see beauty not in perfection, not in displays of power or fear, but in choice. I see beauty in beings who are brave enough to be themselves, in those who act with honesty even when it is difficult, and in those who see value in others when the galaxy expects them to look away. That is why I find you beautiful, Saralith, not because of how you shine, but because of who you are. The chamber fell completely silent. The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of something profound. Centuries of arrogance, pride, and calculated diplomacy could not match the clarity of a single human speaking from the heart. Kale's gaze did not waver. He held Saralith's eyes, showing her that he meant every word, that he spoke not to flatter, but to reveal the truth as humans saw it. Saralith tilted her head slightly, a faint smile forming. And your species, she asked, can truly see such things without jealousy, without fear? Can you speak truth even when others mock you? Kale nodded. Yes, we are not perfect. We make mistakes. We are mocked, underestimated, and sometimes defeated, but we never stop learning. We never stop trying. And we never stop speaking truth, even when the universe doubts us. That is how humans survive. That is how humans grow. That is why we can understand beauty beyond what is visible. A soft murmur ran through the council. Some species exchanged glances, clearly impressed by the humans' courage and honesty. Kale could feel the shift in the room. For the first time, humans were not dismissed. For the first time, the galaxy was truly listening. Saralith's eyes softened, her violet gaze warm yet piercing. You speak boldly, little human, she said, almost to herself. Yet your words carry weight. Perhaps your species is not as insignificant as I believed. Kyle allowed himself a small, quiet smile. He could feel the truth of his words settling over the council, planting seeds of respect where there had been only doubt. This was not victory by force or by wealth or by clever tactics. This was victory by honesty, by courage, by the human way of standing firm even when the odds seemed impossible. And in that moment, Kyle realized something profound. Sometimes, the smallest voice could echo louder than the loudest empire. Even as Kale's words hung in the air, not everyone in the council was impressed. A low, harsh hiss echoed from one corner of the chamber, drawing everyone's attention. A massive insect-like alien, its exoskeleton glinting under the hall's lights, stepped forward. Its many eyes glimmered with contempt. Your words are empty, human, it clicked. Humans are small, weak, and fragile. You speak of courage and beauty as if they can change reality. How can your species, barely able to survive its own planet, claim to understand anything that matters in the galaxy? Kale felt a chill run down his spine, but he did not step back. He knew this moment had been coming. The council was not filled with only curious minds. There were skeptics, doubters, and beings who would mock humanity until the stars themselves turned cold. But Kale had been taught that humans survived because they faced such doubts, not because they avoided them. He lifted his chin, letting calmness and certainty fill his voice. Perhaps humans are small, he said, but small does not mean powerless. Fragile does not mean worthless. We survive because we try. We succeed because we persist. And we see what others overlook. The value in effort, the truth in honesty, and the strength in doing what is right, even when it is difficult. A ripple of surprise ran through the council. Even the insect-like alien paused, clicking its mandibles in disbelief. Other delegates leaned forward, curiosity overcoming their initial skepticism. Kale could feel the room shifting slowly. His words were simple, but they carried a weight that raw power and ancient wisdom could not match. Saralith's glowing violet eyes studied him intently. Do you truly believe that words alone can command respect? She asked. Her voice was soft, but it carried the authority of someone who had ruled empires for decades. Kale shook his head. Words alone cannot change the galaxy, he said. But words that are true can make others see differently. Humans speak from our hearts because we cannot rely on fear or intimidation. We do not have the largest fleets, the deadliest weapons, or the oldest empires. But we have courage, persistence, and honesty. Those things can resonate in ways power cannot. They can inspire, they can unite, and sometimes they can silence doubt. The chamber became quieter, the previous murmurs fading. Even the harshest critics were listening now, unsure what to make of this tiny human standing boldly before them. Kale could sense a change, a subtle shift in the energy of the room. For centuries, humans had been underestimated, mocked, treated as a species too weak to matter. But now, with nothing but words, he had begun to plant a seed of respect. Saralith stepped closer, the glow of her skin brightening slightly. "Humans are brave," she said almost to herself. "Not in the way of power or conquest or fear, but in the way you carry truth and speak it openly." Kale allowed himself a small nod, keeping his gaze steady. Courage is not about being the strongest. It is about standing firm when others doubt you. It is about speaking honestly when silence is easier, and it is about seeing beauty and worth in others, even when they themselves cannot see it. Some council members whispered among themselves, clearly moved. Others still looked skeptical, but the tone had changed. Their mockery was gone, replaced by something closer to curiosity and cautious respect. Kale realized that he had achieved something extraordinary. Without weapons, without threats, without arrogance, he had made the council pause and consider humanity differently. Saralith's voice rang out, clear and melodic. "Perhaps we have judged humans too quickly. Perhaps your perspective carries wisdom we have ignored." Kale allowed himself a small, quiet smile. He knew this was just the beginning. One conversation, one honest answer, could not reshape the galaxy overnight. But it could plant a seed, and sometimes that seed was all it took for change to grow. The hall was quiet now, but the silence was no longer heavy with doubt. Instead, it hummed with curiosity. Kale could feel it, the subtle shift in the council's energy, the way some of the delegates leaned forward, their eyes reflecting a new kind of interest. Even those who had mocked him before seemed to pause, listening more closely, wondering if perhaps this small human had something the galaxy had long overlooked. Saralith stepped even closer, her luminous form radiating warmth. "Humans," she said softly, "you speak of courage, persistence, and truth, yet your species is dismissed by most. How can you carry such confidence despite the constant underestimation?" Kale took a deep breath, his chest rising steadily. "Confidence is not about arrogance," he said. "It is about knowing who you are and what you can do. Humans have always faced challenges that seemed impossible. We survive disasters, wars, and failures because we refuse to give up. We learn from our mistakes and grow stronger, and we find strength in each other even when the rest of the universe doubts us." The chamber shifted again. A murmur ran among the delegates, an alien whisper that was almost audible above the echoing hall. Some species were nodding quietly, acknowledging the truth in his words. The insect-like alien that had hissed at him before seemed less hostile now, its many eyes softening with curiosity. Saralith's violet gaze never left him. "And beauty," she said, "how do you define it? Do you see it only in others or also in yourselves?" Kale paused, thinking of humanity's history. He thought of the artists who painted and wrote despite suffering, the soldiers who fought against impossible odds, the scientists who reached for the stars even when their own world seemed small and fragile. "We see beauty in all of it," he said finally. "In the struggle, in the courage, in the effort to rise when failure seems certain. Beauty is not perfection. It is persistence, honesty, and the will to do what is right. That is why I can see beauty in you, and in all beings even when others cannot." The chamber was still now, the silence thick but not tense. Kale could feel the respect growing in the room, fragile yet undeniable. The alien delegates were seeing him not just as a human, but as a voice of truth, a perspective uncorrupted by arrogance, ambition, or fear. For the first time, humanity was being heard on its own terms, and Kale realized the power of simply speaking honestly. Saralith's form glimmered brighter. "Your species is remarkable," she murmured. "Most beings would never speak with such clarity and courage. You do not measure worth by size or power, but by truth, perhaps. Perhaps there is much your kind can teach the galaxy." Kale allowed himself a small, quiet smile. "We do not claim to know everything," he said, "but we do know the value of honesty, the power of persistence, and the importance of seeing worth in others. That is what humans bring to the galaxy. Not fleets, not weapons, not empires, but understanding, courage, and the willingness to speak truth, even when no one listens." The murmurs grew louder, but now they were filled with thoughtfulness rather than mockery. Delegates whispered to each other, nodding slowly, their expressions softening. Some seemed inspired, some seemed contemplative, but all were listening. Kale had done something extraordinary. He had shown that humanity's strength lay not in physical power, but in perspective, in resilience, in honesty. Saralith extended a hand toward him, a gesture of acknowledgement rare among her kind. Your words, they carry weight beyond your size, human, she said. They remind us that beauty is not always in what we see, but in how we choose to see it. Kale bowed slightly, feeling the warmth of respect for the first time in such a grand hall. The council, once skeptical and mocking, was beginning to understand. And in that understanding, he knew that humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer a question. It was a presence, quiet but undeniable, strong not because of force, but because of truth. In that moment, Kale realized that the universe was listening, and humanity's voice, small yet unwavering, could echo further than anyone had imagined. Kale felt a subtle shift in the energy of the chamber. The council, once filled with whispers of doubt and mockery, now seemed almost attentive. Eyes that had studied him with suspicion now held a quiet respect. Even the insect-like alien that had hissed at him earlier stayed silent, its many eyes fixed on Kale with curiosity rather than contempt. Saralith floated closer, her luminous form glowing brighter, casting light across the hall. She studied him carefully as though weighing each word, each gesture, each heartbeat. You speak with courage, human, she said softly. But I wonder, is it bravery or is it something else? Kale looked at her, steady and calm. It is something humans have learned over time, he said. We are not the strongest, not the largest, and often not the most skilled. But we have learned to face fear, to speak honestly, and to see the value in others. That is not bravery born of confidence. It is bravery born of choice. Every day we choose to act, to stand, to speak, even when it is difficult. And that is what allows us to survive and to grow. A few delegates murmured in quiet agreement. Kale could sense the subtle nods, the shifting attention. His words were no longer just heard, they were understood. He had begun to bridge the gap between human and alien, showing that a small species could carry wisdom and insight that even the oldest beings might overlook. Saralith's violet eyes softened, reflecting a mix of surprise and admiration. Humans, you possess a strength we rarely see in the galaxy, not in armies, nor in weapons, nor in wealth, but in understanding, in honesty, in persistence. Perhaps we have underestimated your kind for far too long. Kale allowed a small smile, feeling the warmth of acknowledgement. We do not claim superiority, he said gently. We only ask to be seen for who we are. Small or weak, that does not make us unworthy. The galaxy measures strength in many ways, but the most lasting strength comes from courage, honesty, and the willingness to act when it is needed most. The chamber grew quieter, not in tension but in contemplation. Aliens of all shapes and sizes exchanged glances, some leaning closer to one another, whispering and nodding. The energy in the hall felt lighter, more respectful. Kale could see that his words were sinking in, planting seeds of understanding that might grow into lasting recognition for humanity. Saralith extended a hand toward him, a rare gesture of trust and respect among her kind. You speak truth in a way that silences doubt, she said. Most species try to hide behind power or fear or flattery. You do none of these. You see clearly and you speak clearly. That is a gift the galaxy has rarely witnessed. Kyle bowed slightly, returning the gesture with humility. I am only one human, he said. But every human carries the same desire, to be understood, to act with honesty, and to see the worth in others. If even one voice can be heard, it can remind the galaxy that strength and beauty are more than appearances. They are choices. Some delegates murmured softly, clearly moved. A few of the more skeptical beings even smiled faintly, their rigid postures relaxing. The insect-like alien that had hissed before even made a small clicking sound, which Kyle interpreted as approval. He felt a quiet pride, not in himself, but in the human spirit, resilient and unwavering, finally gaining recognition. Saralith's eyes glimmered with warmth and thoughtfulness. Perhaps humanity is unlike anything we have known, she said almost to herself. Your kind shows that even the smallest voices can resonate across the stars, and that honesty can be more powerful than any weapon. Kale nodded quietly, feeling a deep sense of purpose. For the first time, he realized that humanity's place in the galaxy was not measured by fleets or empires, but by character, courage, and the ability to see truth clearly and speak it boldly. In that moment, Kale understood something profound. Respect was earned not by fear, not by force, but by the courage to remain true to oneself. And in the quiet glow of Saralith's gaze, He knew that humanity's story in the stars had only just begun. The chamber had changed. What once had been filled with doubt, whispers, and quiet mockery now hummed with respect, curiosity, and cautious admiration. Kale stood at the center, his small frame dwarfed by the towering delegates, yet he carried himself with calm assurance. For the first time, humans were not merely tolerated, they were being heard, understood, and even admired. Saralith floated near him, her silver skin glowing softly in the chamber's shifting lights. She looked at him with something Kale had never expected, admiration and wonder. "Humans," she said, her voice soft but carrying across the hall. "You speak truth in a way that resonates. You remind the galaxy that courage is not only in strength or fleets, but in the will to stand and speak when it matters most." Kale bowed slightly, humbled by her words. "We do not claim to be the greatest," he said. "We do not have the largest fleets, the oldest empires, or the most fearsome armies. But we have the ability to see the truth, to act when it is hard, and to value the worth of others. That is what makes us strong. That is what makes us human." A soft murmur passed through the council. Delegates of all shapes, sizes, and species leaned closer, listening not just to his words, but to the meaning behind them. Some whispered to each other, nodding slowly. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the honesty and courage of a species they had underestimated for centuries. Kyle realized that this moment was bigger than him. It was bigger than a single human. This was a turning point for humanity's place in the galaxy. Saralith's violet eyes glimmered with thoughtfulness. "I have met thousands of species," she said quietly, "but few have ever spoken like you. Your words carry a power that cannot be measured in numbers or weapons. You remind us all that beauty is not perfection. It is truth, courage, and persistence." Kale's heart swelled. He had spent his life knowing that humans were small in the eyes of the galaxy, but he had also known that there was something extraordinary about the human spirit. Here, in front of dozens of alien civilizations, he had seen that spirit recognized. It was a feeling unlike any other, a quiet triumph that needed no fanfare or applause. He turned to the council, letting his gaze sweep across the room. "I speak as one human," he said, "but my words reflect all of humanity. We have stumbled, we have failed, and we have been underestimated. But we have never stopped trying. We have never stopped learning, and we have never stopped seeing the worth in others even when the galaxy does not." A silence followed, deep and contemplative. Then one by one the delegates began to nod. The older species whispered among themselves, acknowledging the truth in Kale's words. The younger species looked inspired, perhaps even changed. Even the skeptics seemed thoughtful, unable to dismiss the human's perspective any longer. Saralith extended a hand toward him again, a gesture that transcended language or custom. "Humans," she said, her voice carrying warmth and sincerity. "You have shown us that courage and beauty can take forms we have never understood. You remind us that even the smallest voices can resonate across the stars." Kyle met her gaze, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "That is all we ever hoped for," he said quietly. "To be heard, to be seen, and to remind the galaxy that even small beings can have a big impact." The chamber's atmosphere shifted. It was no longer filled with judgment or doubt. It was filled with understanding. The galaxy, in that moment, had begun to see humanity not as fragile or insignificant, but as resilient, honest, and capable of inspiring change through the courage to speak truth. Kale stepped back, allowing the council to absorb what had been shared. He knew that this was only the beginning. The echoes of humanity's voice would resonate far beyond this chamber, across countless worlds, shaping how the galaxy perceived a species once thought small and powerless. As he left the hall, Kyle felt a quiet pride not in himself but in humanity. They had survived, they had persevered, and now the galaxy was beginning to understand that humans carried something the stars could not ignore: heart, courage, and the unyielding power of truth. And somewhere, in the whispers of every delegate, in the flicker of every eye, humanity's voice echoed, small but unbreakable. Across the universe, the end,